Well, hello again. Today we are going to be going through Revelation chapter 2, verse 8 to verse 11. We're going to be talking about the church of Smyrna. And so I hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions, write them down and we can talk about them in the live tutorial. So let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for this time. I pray that you just speak to us, Lord. I thank you again that we get to come together wherever we're at in the world. And I pray that you just speak to us and in your son's name. Amen. So, Revelation chapter 2, verse 8. Sorry, I'm got a bit of phlegm in my throat. Got some water, so if you hear me almost choking or whatnot, it's just getting over some cold or sickness, or hopefully getting over not getting it. Anyways, Revelation 2, verse 8 to 11. And to the angel of the church in Smyrna write these things, says the first and the last. He who was dead and came to life, I know your works, tribulation, poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. So, again, as per my custom, or what we will do for these 7 churches, we'll talk a little bit about the city, maybe a small mention about the church, and then we'll dive into the verse by verse text. Notice the city of Smyrna was founded as early as 3000 BC. That's before Christ, or before Common Era. But the first Greek settlement didn't take place in Smyrna until about 1000 BC. That's 1000 before Christ, or before Common Era. Now, it was the city of Smyrna was destroyed in 600 BC by the Lydians, and then Smyrna laid in ruins, or laid basically desolate, until about 290 BC, when 2 of Alexander the Great's successors rebuilt the city. The rebuilt city is the one that Jesus is addressing and writing to. It's now called a Turkish city called Izmir. Smyrna has been called the loveliest of all the 7 churches, of all the cities of the 7. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. Smyrna has been called the loveliest city. Out of all 7 churches that are mentioned in Revelation, it's referred to as the loveliest. It was one of the few well-planned cities in ancient times. If you think about a city, and you drive into the city, and you drive in during traffic time or rush hour, and you have a tendency to think, man, this is horrible, how do I get from this place to this place? Or, man, there's so much traffic and here, and there's no place to expand. That's because they didn't plan very well. One city that I think of in my mind when I think of that is Marietta, California. There's booming, it's massive, it's huge, it's growing, but they can't build any more roads. They can't do any more with that because it wasn't well thought of. They didn't quite think it was going to be a booming metropolis as it is. But Smyrna was different. It was well planned. It was well thought out. The nicknames of Smyrna are called the Crown of Asia, the Ornament of Asia, the Flower of Asia. Aristarchus called Smyrna a flower of beauty such as earth and sun had ever shown to mankind. Now, Smyrna was a long and trusted ally to the Roman Empire, and particularly to Rome. There's a story, or a legend, if you will, of the Roman army. They had gone out to battle and to fight, and they had gone out during winter, and it was a particularly hard winter, a winter where some supply chains were cut off, or supplies were not able to get to the army, and they were struggling to provide and struggling to survive, really. And uh, the messenger brought news of the army to the city of Smyrna, and as the messenger's giving the information, telling them that it's a hard winter, the army's going to struggle, they may or may not survive, just from the conditions of the winter, it's reported that the citizens of Smyrna literally took their clothes off and gave them to the messengers so that they could then take their clothes back to the army. And that just shows the dedication and the love that the city of Smyrna had for Rome and the Roman Empire. When the city was destroyed by an earthquake, Emperor Marcus Aurelius rebuilt the city. Smyrna was granted the privilege to be self-governed, much like the Church of Ephesus, the city of Ephesus. Now, Smyrna was one of the wealthiest cities in Asia. It was second only to Ephesus. Smyrna was the home of Homer, the Greek poet, not the character on Simpsons. Smyrna was a coastal city and that had a harbor. Now, typically, I'm not much of a marine guy. I'm not much of an ocean person or one who sails ships or anything. I don't do any of that. But for those of us who don't know, it helped me a little bit, is that harbors are safe havens. They're places where boats would come in to be protected when there's storms or whatnot. Now, typically, a harbor had a large opening so boats could come in, but it's small enough to keep the big waves out, and it would keep those massive waves out. But typically, harbors had quite a large opening where you couldn't close anything off. But supposedly, Smyrna had such a small opening that they could take a chain and run a chain across the opening to keep ships from coming into the harbor. It was one now, as one would enter the city, if you came in from the harbor and you would come into the city, you would look up and you would see this massive mountain or hills, if you will, and that was what the city was really built on and around, was these hills. They're called the pagos, if you will. And across the hills, they had different buildings. They were temples, noble buildings, judicial buildings, city council buildings, all strewed across the top of these hills. And these buildings were placed in such a way that it looked like, and it's referred to as the Crown of Smyrna. These buildings sort of referred to as the crown. There's also a street in the city of Smyrna that would wind down this hill, and the street started at the Temple of Zeus and it ended at the Temple of Cybele, and it was referred to as the Street of Gold. William Barclay says that the street ran crosswise across the foothills of the Pagos, the hill of Smyrna. And if the buildings which encircled the hill were the crown of Smyrna, the Street of Gold was the necklace around the hill. As I mentioned, Smyrna is still here today, and it's reported to have a Christian presence in it. Other Greek writings were told that it was quite a wicked city, and it oppressed the citizens, or particularly the Christian citizens within that city, quite severely. Now, the Church of Smyrna, the Church of Smyrna is not found in the book of Acts. There's actually nothing written about or to this church anywhere other than what we have here in the book of Revelation. It's most likely that this church was established during the time of Paul in Ephesus, back in Acts 19, verse 10. The distance from Ephesus to Smyrna is about 35 miles or 56 kilometers to the north. If you have those slides that I have on the Moodle, if you download those, there's the map, and it's the first city. If you start at Ephesus and you go north on the map, it's the first city that you come to. And basically, you're going to make this sort of arch as we go through the seven churches in Asia. Many of you know the early church father Polycarp. Polycarp was the bishop of Smyrna, and he was alive from about 70 A.D. to about 155 A.D. Thereabouts. Now, Smyrna, the name Smyrna, or the word Smyrna, means myrrh. Myrrh is it comes from a small bushy like tree, and it was cultivated in ancient times in the Arabian Peninsula. That's where it was predominant. Now, obviously, modern day agriculture, you can grow it just about anywhere. But the grower would make a small cut in the bark, and there would be this resin or this sap that would come out of the bark, and it was then collected and stored for about 3 months or so until it hardened and created these fragrant globules or droplets, if you will. And sometimes it was used raw. You just ingest it or sort of rub it on yourself. But usually it was crushed, and it was used to mix in an oil and to make a perfume or fragrance. It had been used, or even has been used in modern day, to reduce swelling and stop pain. If you're into essential oils, you can buy myrrh and use that to reduce swelling or help stop the pain. Myrrh was used most commonly as a perfume for embalming the dead. Because it was such a strong, fragrant smell, it would help mask the smell of death when someone died and was decaying. Now, myrrh is used to describe Christ throughout the Bible. Most specifically, it's described the bridegroom. That's the word, and we know him as Christ, but that was the word that's used. If you see that in Psalm 45 verse 8, as well as Song of Solomon chapter 3 verse 6. It's also used, or it was also used, as a form of worship in the Old Testament tabernacle in Exodus chapter 30 verse 23. So typically myrrh was a perfume or fragrance that you would harvest from the tree, you crush it, and then you add oil to it to give it a bit of a liquid form, and then you could put the fragrant on yourself, or you put it on the one that you're embalming. But that's what it was used for. Now, coming to chapter 2, verse 8. To the angel of the church of Smyrna write these things, says the first and the last, who is dead and came to life. The description of Christ, the title of Christ. Notice, again, this is a quote directly from chapter 1, verse 11, and verse 18. It also indicates that Jesus was at the beginning of time, at the end of time. Remember, the first and the last, the one who was dead and came to life, the one who is there at the beginning of life as well as at the end of all life. Now, he who is dead and came to life is an interesting phrase. The tense of the word for was, if you're looking at these words in the English and you look at the word was, who was dead, that word there, it means to have experienced in a passing phase. That's the conjugation, or the tense rather, of the word. Now, the idea is that Jesus experienced death or became dead for a time, and it was something that was never going to be for very long, certainly not for an extended period of time, but for a passing moment. Now, why is that important? Think about this for a minute. Everybody dies. We know that. Everybody is appointed to die once, the Bible tells us. Jesus died, but his death is different from our death. Our death is permanent in the sense of this body. Jesus' death was not. His death was but for a moment, and it passed on, and he rose from the dead. So the difference there, or the thing that I want to point out, is that Jesus, yes, he died, but he's not still dead. He is passed into death, and then he's moved on to life. So he went through this phase of having death and no longer has it. To some extent, it could be I was at the grocery store. I went to the grocery store, I was there for a little bit, but then I left. So there was a moment in time that I had entered the grocery store, but then there's a moment of time where I exited the grocery store. That's what that word describes for Jesus. He entered into death, was there for a time, but then he exited out of death. But then look at the word alive, or came to life, depending on your translation. The tense of the word alive or came to life is not present tense as it is in the English. So it's not in the he's not saying that he is alive, but he's in the aorist tense. Now the aorist tense in the Greek describes something that is completed and finished in the past. Now why is that important? Why does that make a difference? If it's in the present tense, that can change. The present can all of a sudden become the past, right? But the aorist means that it happened, it's finished, and it's done, and it's not changing again. A better translation would be came to life, again referencing the resurrection. Put it this way. John Walvoord said, the Church of Smyrna is told that the one who is eternal became incarnate and died, a reminder that even the eternal Son of God willingly became subject to the rejections and persecution of man. William Barclay says, the risen Christ is he who experienced death, who passed into death, through and out of death, and he came to life again in a triumphant entry of resurrection, and who is alive forevermore. So again, Jesus went into death, came out of death, and is never going to go back into death again. That he is currently alive and will remain alive forevermore. That's not going to change. The church was known for persecution, that they received much persecution. And yet Christ describes the one who has died and rose again. He's relating to their circumstances. He's relating to the things that they are dealing with. He's also saying he's willingly going through persecution or went through persecution. There's even an interesting connection to the city because it laid in ruins for about 400 years before it was rebuilt. So there's an interesting connection to the city of how they, as a city, were dead for about 400 years, but then came back to life. Jesus is trying to relate to them. But notice verse 9, I know your works, tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. The word there, know, means to know by perception, to have experience of something. This word to know is more about the perception or the observation of something. It's not so much the experiential knowledge, although there could be an element of that. But it typically means that I have observed what you're going through. I see, I have compassion, I probably even have understanding of what you're dealing with. And so Jesus says, I know what you're going through. Now, there's some manuscripts that take out the words, I know your works. And so it simply just states, I know your tribulations, your poverty. And either way, the point is that Christ saw where they were spiritually and physically. Both they were there persecuted physically, but they are also rich spiritually. They had a difficulty, yet Jesus understood and had compassion upon them. Notice he says, I know your tribulation. I know your pressure. This word for tribulation is one of the most common words for tribulation, in meaning that it's persecution or a pressure pressing downwards. G. Campbell Morgan said, our word for tribulation suggests the stripe of the Roman whip. But the word the master used suggests rather a pressure of the stones that grind the wheat or that force the blood out of the grape. The idea of tribulation, at least from the English side, is it almost gives this idea of quick, short pain that is temporary. which could be. But the Greek word is more descriptive, and it gives this idea that could be long-lasting. And it's not a quick pain, but a long-lasting pain. And it's not a sharp pain, but it's more of a pressure. Almost as if you're being crushed by a rock or a heavy thing that is pushing down a weight on your chest or your shoulders. Christ is stating that he sees the persecution that they are going through. G. Kevin Morgan goes on and he says, Jesus did not say, I know thy trials, the occasional testings, those experiences which are common to all saints, but I know thy tribulation. So Jesus makes a distinction here. He says, I know your tribulations. He doesn't say, I know your difficulties, I know your woes, your sorrows, the things that you struggle with. No, he says, I see that you're being persecuted. I see the pressure that you have upon your life. Basically, Jesus is identifying that tribulation that is specific to those in Smyrna. Not trials that are generic to all Christians, but this persecution that is specific to the church of Smyrna. Also, remember, who is Jesus speaking to? He's speaking to the pastor or the leader. Therefore, he's saying that the trials and tribulations you personally are going through. Now, yes, this is addressed to the church, in Smyrna. But remember, it's also addressed to the angel of the church. So maybe it's this pastor that is dealing with things as well as the church. Now, notice, he says poverty. I see your poverty. Or, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. Now, the word there, poverty, it's interesting. There's typically two Greek words for poor or poverty. There's penes, which is P-E-N-E-S. P-E-N-E-S. And this means to those who struggle to meet their basic needs. You think of struggling Bible school students. They're poor. They're in poverty. They don't have enough money for their noodles or to go on an outreach or whatever it is. They're struggling to make ends meet. The idea is that they eat, they have clothing, they have a place to sleep, but they may not have all that they need, but they're okay. This is not the word that's used. The word that's used here is pochia, P-T-O-C-H-E-I-A, P-T-O-C-H-E-I-A. Now, this word means completely without. The word here, it means completely without and refers to the fact that they may have had possessions at one point in time. They may have had a livelihood at one point in time, but they no longer have the ability to gain anything because of possible persecution or possible whatever. This is one who begs for their life or begs for their livelihood, either through alms or panhandling. This is the word that's used here in Revelation. William Barclay put it this way. It has been put this way that Pene describes a man who had nothing superfluous, so nothing extra. But Pochia describes the state of a man who has nothing at all. So there's the difference between the two words, the one who has nothing extra, but then the one who has nothing at all. So Christ here said that they have nothing at all. This is possibly because of the persecution, the tribulation. If you think about it, as Christians in the church of Smyrna, if they were so persecuted, they could have been persecuted out of their jobs, persecuted out of their homes, persecuted out of their friends, their family, pushed out to the edge of society so that they couldn't provide for their basic needs of life. But then notice there's a bit of a oxymoron or a paradox or something that Jesus uses here. He says, I see your poverty, but you are rich. This is seeing that they are rich not in monetary things, not in earthly things, but they are rich in Christ. James chapter 2 verse 5 says, poor in the world, rich in faith. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 10 says, as poor yet making many rich. Both verses referring to the riches that are stored in heaven. Ultimately, Matthew 6:20 tells us that to store our riches in heaven, because moth and rust cannot destroy anything there. So they may have been poor in physical needs, in monetary needs, and the things here on earth, but they are rich in Christ. Oh man, sorry guys. This is what I get for sleeping in today. So, notice he says, Jesus goes on, he says, I know the blasphemy of those who are called Jews. Blasphemy means to be sluggish or stupid, to speak in such a way as to harm or injure someone's reputation. Now, this is not so much about swearing against God, although it could be, but it's more about against the people. Those that say they are Jews but are not. It seems that they're saying that those Jews were a temple of the devil. Notice, they proclaim to be something that they really are not. The word there, synagogue, it means a congregation or a gathering. A synagogue was a place of worship or meeting for the Jews. And so what Jesus is saying is he's saying, look, they call themselves Jews, but in reality they're just a meeting place for Satan. They're a place where Satan can meet with those who are against God. It's interesting because Christ knows where they are. He knows that they are in a place of spiritual warfare. They claim to be one thing, Jews, but then in reality they're not. So Christ is sympathizing with the church. He says, I understand. I see what you're going through. And to some extent he's saying, have patience, have grace, I'm here for you. But then we come to, remember, if you remember back to last time we met, we went through the 7 components, and so far we went through several. We went through the title, the name, and I know your works. I know what you have done. And this is typically the point in the 7 letters where we would come to the rebuke of the church. What is something that the church has done wrong or is lacking in? If you look back at the church of Ephesus, what they did was they left their first love. They did only one thing wrong, in that they left their first love. Now, here in the church of Smyrna, nothing bad is said about it. It is one of the 2 churches that have nothing bad said about them. It shows that they listened and they obeyed continually to the commendation of Christ. G. Campbell Morgan said, the master's method in commending this church at Smyrna is remarkable. He offers them no solution of problem of their pain, and it may be said that the commendation is contained in the silence and parentheses. His approval of this church is manifest not so much by what he said, as by the fact that he had no complaint to make concerning them. And that's so true, is that there's so much, sometimes we can get caught up on saying the right thing or saying something or just being able to say and contribute to the conversation, when in reality, silence can speak louder than words. And that's what Christ does. His approval is not so much in what he says, but it's in what he doesn't say. He doesn't condemn them. He doesn't rebuke them. And therefore, he's showing his approval of them. So we see that we move on. We see that Jesus agrees with where they're at. Now, some have questioned, is God's silence about this church a sign of disapproval? Well, like what G. Campbell Morgan said, he said, it may be that a silence is a sign of not of disapproval, but approval. If in the midst of tribulation and suffering there is no voice, it may be that the silence of the Lord is his highest commendation. So to me, I think it's a sign of approval, and that Jesus was happy with where they were at. So the spiritual condition or the counsel, what do they do or what should they do in light of where they are at and what they are going through? Jesus says, do not fear. Now, do not fear, this could be translated as stop being afraid. That word there for fear, it's where we get our English word phobia from. It literally means awe or reverence. It's, we get the word arachnophobia, fear of spiders, claustrophobia, fear of small spaces. And so Jesus is saying, don't be or stop being afraid. Just because you're going through hard times, just because you're going through difficult things, there's no need to be afraid. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. Now, the things which you are about to suffer. He says, don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. The word there, suffer, means to undergo an experience that is unusually difficult and normally with the implication of physical or psychological suffering. So the idea is that Jesus says, look, you're about to suffer something that is going to be very difficult. Don't be afraid of this. That word there for suffer is the word that's used for Christ suffering in Acts chapter 1, verse 3. Notice that Jesus tells them, don't be afraid. It's just before he tells them there's more difficulty coming. So he's saying, look, what you're going through is hard, it's difficult, yes, but what you're about to go through is going to be even more difficult and harder. He says, some of you are going to be thrown in prison. And notice it says it's a test. Them being thrown into prison is a test to tempt and to try, to endeavor or examine someone. Now, this trial is coming from the devil. Yes, God is allowing it, and he's allowing them to be put into prison as a test to prove their faithfulness. Now the question is, who are they trying to, who needs the revealing of their faithfulness, or who needs the results of their faithfulness? It's not God, he knows, but the devil knows now, but also we know, and others know of our faithfulness. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13 says, we will not be tempted or tried beyond what we can handle. The word in 1 Corinthians 10:13 as well as Revelation 2:10 is the same root word, meaning they are referencing the same type of temptation or trials. So the temptation and trials that God is allowing the church of Smyrna to go through is what Paul refers to in Corinthians 1 Corinthians 10:13, saying you won't be given anything more than you can handle. So they are given this trial because Jesus knows they can handle it. He knows, he understands where they are at, and he sees that they are able to handle it. It says they will have tribulation for 10 days. The word there for tribulation, again, pressure, pressing down. Very common word for tribulation in the New Testament. Now, there is a bit of a debate as to what does 10 days mean. Was it literal 10 days? Was it figurative 10 days? Is it allegorical? And so there's a few different ideas. Was it literal to the church at that point in time? Or was that meant for us at our point in time? Or does it speak of something else? Well, some have tried to connect this to literal 10 days in prison for the believers in Smyrna, which I think is fitting, and I think that's probably the best option out there. Others have tried to connect it to 10 Roman Caesars of the time, and so they went from Nero to Dalmatia to all those that are there at that point in time. Others have connected to 10 years or even 10 months of persecution. I think the one commentator said the expression is probably used to signify a short and limited time. And I think that's about as far as we can go. I think it was very specific for those believers at that time. I think it is more for them than it was for us. But I do believe we will go through periods of tribulation. And notice, it's a short period of tribulation. It's not an eternal period of tribulation, but a short period. Either way, it's a short period. It's not lasting forever. It will come to an end. Now, the question does have to be asked, why tribulation? Why suffering? Or what purpose does suffering hold in a Christian's life? In reality, there's probably at least four reasons, and John Walvoord points these out in his commentary on the Book of Revelation. I really like how he does, but I think there's four reasons, and the first one is disciplinary. The Lord is showing that a person needs to get right with Him. So he's kind of using tribulation tribulation to point the person back to Him. See that in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 30, Hebrews 12, verse 3. So it's a disciplinary thing. Hey, come on, let's get back on track. Another one is to keep someone humble. We think of Paul's thorn in the flesh, 2 Corinthians 12:7, that sometimes a bit of pressure, a bit of trials allows us to remain humble. It keeps us on the ground, so to speak. Another option, or number three, is it gives a Christian a better testimony. Think of what Paul said in Acts 9, verse 16. For I will show him how many things he will suffer for my name's sake. So it's not about anything other than giving a Christian the ability to speak into people's lives. That I know for my sake, having gone through certain things, I'm able to relate to people better, and I've found connection with people because of my experiences and my understanding. So going through certain trials or tribulations, it allows us to connect with people. But then the last one, and this one's very interesting, it could teach something that we would never have understood otherwise. John Walvoord says suffering is also represented in Scripture as teaching a child of God what would otherwise remain unlearned. Romans chapter 5, verse 3-5. We cannot have a testimony without a test. And I think of in my own life, I never really fully understood death. Because I didn't have anybody close to me die in my own life until my father died. And once my father passed away, I knew what it meant to lose a loved one. And I knew what it meant to grieve and to be sad and to have to come up with a new normal of life while your father is gone. And so sometimes we have these pressures, these tribulations in our life, so that we can learn something that we wouldn't learn or know or even be able to relate to others any other possible way. So those aren't all encompassing, those aren't all inclusive, but there's certainly some interesting points as to why there's pressure, or tribulation in a Christian's life. So notice, why is the church of Smyrna in persecution? We're actually not told. I do believe it to be either to learn something or that could not have been learnt otherwise, or maybe to give them a better testimony. I don't think it's disciplinary, because if you look, Jesus doesn't correct them for anything. They're not doing anything wrong. And again, I don't think they're trying to be made humble, because there's no pride that is mentioned. So I think it's the latter two, in the sense of giving them a better testimony, or even teaching them something that they would not have learned otherwise. Now notice, Jesus does tell them two things in light of their trials. Don't fear, and be faithful to death. So he says, don't fear what you're about to suffer, be faithful. So it's a negative and a positive. In stop doing this, start doing that. Be faithful. Now they are to be faithful unto death. Literally translated, it says, become faithful until death. The word there for faithful means to trust, to being trusted, or trustworthy. Now, what's interesting is that Jesus, what he's implying, it would seem that he is implying that death is inevitable, which it is. Death is on everybody's doorstep. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. We are only given today. But he said that the trials will last a short time. Remember? 10 days. But there might be some that will lose their lives. It could also mean that Jesus is saying, be faithful after these trials till the day that you die. Be faithful. So it's not just this concept or this idea of only be faithful while the trials are here until you die in these trials, but these trials are going to be short-lived. Therefore, when they're over, you're going to need to continue to be faithful. That when the trials finish, you will need to continue to be faithful. Sorry, let me just blow my nose real quick. Now, notice, if they are faithful, notice what Jesus says. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. Now, there's a bit of debate as to, do you get one crown or do you get many crowns? And there are many crowns mentioned throughout the New Testament. First off, there's two types of crowns that are mentioned. There's Diadem and Stefanos. Now, diadem is the Greek word for a crown, the king's crown, if you will. It's a type of crown that showed a king or royalty. This word is really only used about 3 times in the New Testament. Revelation chapter 12, verse 3, Revelation 13, verse 1, and Revelation 19, verse 2. Now, that's the king's crown. That's not the word that's used here. The word that's used here is Stephanos, and this is the Greek word for victor's crown, or victorious, one who is victorious over something. Now, it is something that can fade away, because it was used typically in the Olympic Games, and it was made of a wreath or branches of green leaves and whatnot, and it was placed on the one who had won the race. And so it was something that would wither away. The crown had power, yes. It had prestige and honor. It was showing more of something, that someone had accomplished something rather than they were ruling over something. Now, what's interesting is that this is the word that's used for the crown in chapter 2, verse 10. What's also interesting is that that is the crown that the soldiers placed on Jesus' head, the crown of thorns. Yes, they were mocking him. Yes, they were teasing and being blasphemous, but it was a bit prophetic in that they said, look, it's the King of the Jews. Here is your crown, your victor's crown, the one that you will be victorious over. Did they know that they were being a bit prophetic? I doubt that. It's just an interesting side note. Now, there are 23 times that the word crown is used in the New Testament. And this is the word Stephanos, okay, victor's crown. Now, 4 of those times for Stephanos are specific reference to the crown of thorns, the one that Jesus wore. The remaining 9 of the remaining 19 verses or times is here in Revelation, in the book of Revelation. So the other references in the New Testament is you have Revelation 9:25, you have Philippians 4:1, 1 Thessalonians 2:19, 2 Timothy 2:5, Hebrews 2:7, James 1:12, and 1 Peter 5:4. If you need to pause the video and rewind to get those scripture references again, please feel free to do so. But what I would like to do now is I'm going to go through a few of those. I'll just go through 3 of those that I just quoted, or references that I just gave you, and look at this crown, because I believe we are given one crown, and I want to point out 3 of those passages, but I give you all of those references because I want you to do your own work, your own study, and you figure out your own, whether we're given one or many. Now, the thing to remember is that this is not a salvational issue. Therefore, we are given, whatever we're given, we'll both be in heaven. So, James chapter 1, verse 12. Those who love God receive a crown of life, and they have endured temptation and have been approved. Interesting. 2 Timothy 4:8 says that any who has loved God, then they will receive a crown when that day comes. Okay. 1 Peter says that those who are serving us overseers, those who are serving us as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor being lords over us, over those entrusted to them, but being examples to the flock. So looking at those three, just those three, you look at the others, I think there are some qualifications there for receiving a crown. But notice it says that in 1 Peter, the qualification says those that are those that are serving as overseers, not as compulsion, willingly. 2 Timothy, it says that those who have loved God will receive a crown. In James 1, it says those who love God will receive the crown of life. So I think there's different names for this crown of life, crown, all of those things. But simply, I think we receive one crown because the goal is to love God. And in loving God, we will be faithful until death. As it says here in Revelation 2, we will be overseers that are not lording over those people. We will be faithful. And the last quote I have, Revelation 3:11, tells us that our crown can be taken away from us. Why would it be taken away? Because we're not loving God anymore. We are not following Him. We are not faithful until death. So, again, how many crowns are we given? Personally, I believe one. What would I do with multiple crowns? Where would I put them? I only have one head, but that's just me being practical, and that may not necessarily be the full truth. But we have the promise. We have the command. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Same statement before, the command for all to hear, all that hear are told to hear what the Spirit says to the churches. They are to listen, to receive, to be blessed. Now, the promise, he who overcomes, he who is victorious, he who is a victor. And this is he who overcomes what? He who overcomes the trials and tribulations. They shall not be hurt by the second death. The word there, that phrase second death, is a reference to the lake of fire. It's a reference to Revelation chapter 20, verse 14 to 15. And it says that all who are not found in the book of life will be thrown in the lake of fire. That is eternal punishment. It's separation from God. That's what the second death is. So here, when it says, he who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death, it means those who are victorious, those who are faithful till death, those who overcome trials will not be hurt by the second death. They will have eternal life with God. So the second death is where God will reject. If we reject God on earth, He will reject us in eternity. Now, just to wrap things up here, remember, Smyrna, it means myrrh. Now, remember, how is myrrh made? It's by cutting into a tree, collecting the resin or the sap from the tree, allowing it to get hard, but then crushing it, mixing it with oil. Now look at us. Look at the church of Smyrna. Why is nothing bad said about them? I believe nothing bad is said about them because they were currently being crushed. They were being crushed, and they knew they had to be mixed with the Holy Spirit, mixed with the oil. And so we see that persecution can be a bad thing. If you're anything like me, I try to avoid persecution at all costs. But a pressure, that word for persecution means a pressure, like the pressure that crushes the myrrh, can produce a sweet-smelling aroma unto the Lord. So my question this morning or this afternoon or whatever time of day it is where you are at is, are you being persecuted? Are you going through a tribulation? Think about, why are you going through that tribulation? Is it disciplinary? Are you on the wrong track? Are you doing something you shouldn't be doing? Get right with the Lord. Get out of that. Change your habits. Is it because of pride? Are you too prideful for the Lord to use you? Therefore, He's keeping you pushed down. He's pressing down so that He's working that pride out of you. Thirdly, is it to learn something you would have never learned before? Is it to go through an experience that you would have never learned or understood before? Lastly, is it simply to have a better testimony? My hope and my prayer is that any persecution, trials, or tribulations that you're going through at this point in time is either so that you can learn something you've never known before, or is to have a better testimony. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want tribulations for everybody, but tribulations will come. The question is, why? Why are they here? Are they here because of my own sin, my own issues, my own struggles, or are they here because I'm to grow, I'm to learn? That is what I pray for you this morning and this afternoon. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. I pray that you speak to us, and pray these things in your Son's name. Amen. See you guys.